Right now, there is a 5,000-pound bunker buster bomb cratering the Earth in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And at the exact same time, there's a massive financial penalty freezing a bank in Dubai. And, closer to home, an electric car is quietly catching fire in a suburban driveway.
Which, I mean, on the surface, those sound like completely unrelated
Not
events.
right, completely isolated. But welcome to today's deep dive because we are looking at a huge stack of news sources from today, March 22, 2026, that prove these are actually all symptoms of the exact same terrifying disease.
You really are.
So our mission today for you listening is to connect the dots. We're going to look across global conflicts, economic ripple effects, and even the everyday technology sitting right there in your garage.
And we're going to tie it all to one central theme, which is systems under extreme stress.
Yes, systems under stress.
Because that backdrop is really the only way to understand the headlines you're seeing today. We're looking at a world that is grappling with simultaneous breaking points.
Simultaneous being the key word there.
Exactly. And, since one of our goals in these discussions is to always explore the nuances of the English language, I think the word stress is actually the perfect entry point.
Oh, that's a good point. Because in casual, everyday English, you might use stress to mean like feeling overwhelmed at work, right?
Right, like emotional stress.
Yeah.
But in engineering or physics or systems analysis, stress has a very specific meaning. It's an external force that forces a material to deform.
It's physical pressure.
Exactly. Physical pressure that actively alters the shape of reality. And today, we are witnessing exactly what happens when the built-in cooling mechanisms of our global systems just, well, they fail to handle that deforming pressure.
Okay, so let's start with the most extreme deformation in our sources, which is definitely the geopolitical front lines.
Yeah, the sheer volume of kinetic military action happening all at once right now is just staggering.
It really is. I mean, we have the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran, which the sources note officially began on February 28. And in just a few weeks, the death toll has already surpassed 1,400 people.
And that's not just frontline soldiers. That includes massive systemic figures, right?
Right. People like Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and its Security Council Secretary, Ali Larijani. But the crazy thing is it doesn't even stop there.
No, because you have simultaneous fronts. Israel is also running a ground offensive into southern Lebanon, trying to carve out a buffer zone.
And that offensive alone has left 1,000 dead, plus like 1 million people displaced.
Yeah. And that's been escalating ever since the September 2024 assassination of Hezbollah's Hassan Nasrallah.
Right. And then you look further north and east, and Ukraine has just launched this unprecedented barrage of over 280 drones aimed deep into Russia.
Over 280, that's a massive swarm.
It's huge. And at the same time, there's a deadly drone strike on an intelligence building in Baghdad.
While concurrently, in Cairo, you have Donald Trump's Board of Peace literally handing Hamas a written disarmament proposal.
You literally have the ultimate geopolitical stress test happening on 5 different fronts, all at exactly the same time.
Which is terrifying.
It is. But you know what terrifies me the most reading through these reports? It's the vocabulary being used around the nuclear sites.
Oh, the sanitized language.
Yes. The language is very clinical. It's almost designed to avoid panic. But the underlying mechanism of what is actually happening is incredibly dangerous.
Well, let's look at the details. The source's detail strikes near Dimona in Israel.
Right. Which is widely believed to host the region's undeclared nuclear arsenal. And 20 people were wounded by shrapnel there.
And then on the other side, Israel and the U.S. are targeting a plant at Natanz in Iran.
Which houses their underground nuclear centrifuges.
And that is exactly where the 5,000-pound bunker buster bombs come into play.
Right, because Admiral Brad Cooper, the head of U.S. Central Command, announced they deployed those on an Iranian underground coastal facility.
Yeah. And to really understand the gravity of that, you have to look at the mechanism of that specific weapon. A bunker buster doesn't just, explode on the surface.
It digs in first.
Exactly. It uses a delayed fuse and a really hardened casing to penetrate super deep into the earth before detonating. So it creates this massive concussive shock wave.
Like a subterranean earthquake?
Yes. And when you unleash that kind of subterranean earthquake near a facility housing delicate, high-speed nuclear centrifuges, You risk catastrophic microfractures in the equipment.
Which completely explains why Rafael Grossi, he's the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, why he's begging for military restraint right now.
He's terrified of a nuclear accident.
Because he's looking at the system's guardrails being stretched to their absolute physical limits.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the political narrative trying to explain this and the actual reality on the ground are completely contradicting each other.
Oh, entirely.
Right. Like, the U.S. president is publicly claiming they've destroyed Iran's military, eliminated its navy and air.
Meanwhile, Iran claims they just hit 2 American air bases with ballistic missiles, one in the UAE, one in Kuwait, and they claim they still completely control the Strait of Hormuz.
It's a total disconnect.
It feels like watching 2 people confidently claim they've won a chess game while the board is actively on fire.
That's a great way to put it. And, both sides are basically deploying the English language to construct a reality for their domestic audiences, rather than describing the physical reality of the conflict.
Oh, like the phrase winding down.
Exactly. Winding down is a classic example of pacifying language. It implies this controlled, orderly deceleration.
Like the cooling system is working.
Right. It suggests everything is cooling off, but the actual data, the missile's still in the air and the disruption of the shipping lanes, it suggests the exact opposite.
Now, before we go any further into the domestic fallout of this, I need to take a quick pause to address you, the listener, directly.
Yeah, this is important.
The sources we are analyzing today contain highly charged political content regarding this war and U.S. politics. And we want to be absolutely crystal clear here. We are not taking sides.
Not at all.
We are not endorsing any right-wing or left-wing viewpoints, nor are we validating any nation's military claims. Our job in this deep dive is simply to impartially report what is written in the text provided to us.
We're just analyzing the systems at play. That is a crucial distinction. We are simply observers of the information ecosystem.
Exactly. And speaking of that ecosystem, one of the most intriguing pieces in our sources today is a profile on the American conservative commentator Tucker Carlson.
Oh, man. He provides a fascinating case study here.
Because it shows how our traditional political vocabulary completely breaks down under the stress of these global events.
Right. I mean, the numbers attached to his current reach are just wild.
The text points out that his debut episode on the platform X after his departure from Fox News hit 120 million views.
120 million. That's unbelievable.
It's massive. And he is using that unprecedented platform to completely buck the traditional partisan lines you'd normally expect during a wartime scenario.
Yeah, he's publicly calling the war on Iran evil.
He's aggressively questioning Western support for Israel. And he's doing it by specifically citing his Christian faith, arguing that it inherently opposes violence, war, and collective punishment.
Which is really shaking up the usual political alignment.
Right, because I have to admit I'm slightly confused by the dynamics here. Usually, the political playbook dictates that a major conservative voice rallies behind a Republican president during wartime.
That's the standard operating procedure, yeah.
Wait, so how does a figure with that much influence operate so far outside the party line?
Well, what's fascinating here is how his specific kind of hybrid worldview disorients standard political classifications.
That's so.
Because his views are rooted in a very specific humanist and faith-based interpretation.
Yeah.
He opposes war, which traditionally aligns with the anti-war left-right.
Right.
But he also opposes abortion, mass migration, and corporate capitalism, which puts him at odds with the left and even certain factions of the right.
So he doesn't fit anywhere neatly?
Exactly. The article actually describes his approach using a beautiful English idiom. They call it the courage of innocence.
Oh, like the kid pointing out the emperor has no clothes.
Exactly that. It implies acting like that child, just asking fundamental questions like, where exactly in the Bible it says supporting a modern nation-state's military campaign is obligatory.
And because he doesn't fit neatly into a predefined box, the system doesn't know how to process him at all.
No. The article notes he's being labeled everything from a white nationalist to an Islamist sympathizer by various critics.
Which are completely opposing labels.
Precisely. Because when a political system is under extreme stress, the old linguistic labels left, right, conservative, liberal, they just fail to describe the reality of the moment. People resort to extreme labels because the nuanced ones have totally broken down.
Man. Which brings us to the next massive system failure in our sources. The global economy.
Because all this geopolitical fire isn't just happening in a vacuum.
Right, it has an immediate cascading effect on your wallet. Because Iran has maintained control over the Strait of Hormuz, the economic cooling system is critically failing.
But the geography is the mechanism here. I
Wow.
mean, the Strait of Hormuz is this massive bottleneck.
1/5 of all the traded oil in the world passes through that narrow strip of water.
It's incredible. And when it gets choked off by military conflict, the global market panics instantly.
Yeah, according to the data in our stack, Brent crude oil prices skyrocketed from $72 a barrel on February 28, which was the first day of the war, to $106 a barrel by this point in March.
Which is a massive jump in a few weeks.
I think it's important to translate what $106 a barrel actually means for the average person, too. Like, it's not just more expensive gas at the pump.
No, it hits everything.
It means the diesel required to ship your groceries costs more. It means petroleum-based fertilizers used to grow your food cost more. It is an inflationary shockwave.
And the proposed solution, documented in the sources, is just a massive contradiction.
Oh, you mean the U.S. Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. He announced a temporary lifting of sanctions to release 140 million barrels of Iranian oil that are already in transit.
Right. They're literally using the English phrase, temporary pressures, to justify bending their own geopolitical rules.
While they are at war with them.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, India's Prime Minister Modi and Iranian President Pezeshkian are pushing for a regional security framework free of Western interference, utilizing the BRICS coalition.
Let's break down that BRICS mechanism real quick, because it's vital.
Yeah, please do.
So BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and its newer members, it functions essentially as an alternative financial plumbing system.
Okay.
For decades, the global economy has run through Western financial institutions and the U.S. dollar. By utilizing BRICS, these nations are attempting to build a bypass valve. It allows them to trade resources like oil and just bypass U.S. sanctions entirely.
So what does this all mean? Like, the U.S. Treasury temporarily unlocking oil from a country it is actively bombing just to lower prices?
Yeah.
It feels incredibly precarious.
It's totally desperate.
It's like a doctor prescribing a strict fasting diet to lower a patient's blood pressure, but then secretly handing the patient a candy bar because they're worried the patient is about to pass out from starvation.
That is the perfect mechanical analogy. The architects of the system are intentionally violating their own rules just to keep the entire structure from collapsing.
Yeah.
And that macro-level bypass of rules, which is driven entirely by sheer survival pressure, it mirrors exactly what happens on a micro level when corporate systems fail.
Oh, right. Our sources include a story about HDFC Bank that perfectly illustrates this phenomenon happening at the individual level.
Let's look at the situation at the bank's branch in Dubai.
Right, so 3 senior staff members at the Dubai International Financial Center branch were fired. And the Dubai Financial Services Authority actually stepped in and barred that specific branch from taking on any new customers.
Which is a huge penalty.
Massive. And the reasoning given is gaps in client onboarding, specifically related to the alleged mis-selling of Credit Suisse's additional Tier 1 bonds.
And this is happening right after the bank's chairman, Atanu Chakraborty, resigned over ethical concerns.
Yeah.
We really need to dissect the terminology here, starting with mis-selling.
Because it sounds kind of tame, right?
It does, but in English financial and legal jargon, mis-selling doesn't just mean like a salesperson made a mistake or gave a bad pitch.
Right.
It means deliberately, recklessly, or negligently selling a financial product to a client that is entirely unsuitable for their risk profile.
Wow.
And the product in question here, AT1 bonds, or additional Tier 1 bonds, they are incredibly complex.
See, I was going to ask about those because most people hear bond and they think of a safe, guaranteed return, like a government savings bond, for example.
Exactly the opposite in this case. AT1 bonds are essentially financial shock absorbers for the bank itself.
Okay.
They offer high returns, but with a massive catch.
Yeah.
If the bank's capital drops below a certain level, these bonds can be forcibly converted into shares or completely written down to zero.
Wait, really? So the investor loses everything just to save the bank?
Yes. Selling these to everyday retail clients who think they're buying a standard safe bond, it's like selling someone a car with brakes that are specifically designed to fail in order to save the engine.
That is incredibly dangerous for the driver.
Extremely. Which is exactly why the client onboarding process is supposed to catch this. In banking, onboarding isn't just signing paperwork, it's the intake valve.
It's the cooling system.
Yes. It's designed to ensure that risky products aren't sold to vulnerable clients and that toxic money doesn't enter the financial ecosystem.
But when the external pressure on those bankers to generate, massive revenue quotas gets too high, Those internal ethical guardrails just get bypassed. They sneak the candy bar.
Exactly. And when the internal controls fail, the external regulators have to step in and shut the whole system down.
Like the DFSA did here.
Right. Because whether we are talking about the global energy market bending sanction rules to survive, or a bank branch in Dubai bypassing ethics to meet quotas, the underlying physics are identical. External pressure overwhelms internal controls.
That concept, external pressure, overwhelming internal controls, it brings us to the most literal, physical, and frankly terrifying example in today's deep dive.
Yeah, this one is tough.
We are going to transition from the abstract world of global shipping and Dubai banking to something that is likely sitting right in your driveway or, even in your pocket right now.
Lithium-ion batteries.
Yes.
This is where the metaphor of systems under stress stops being a metaphor and just becomes a violent chemical reality.
The sources detail a tragic incident in Indore. A fire tore through a house, killing 8 people, and that included 2 children.
It's awful.
And the blaze was sparked by an electric vehicle charging point right outside the home. The article then dives deep into the actual science of why this happens.
Yeah, the scientific term is thermal runaway. And from a linguistic perspective, it's a terrifyingly accurate descriptor.
How so?
Well, thermal obviously relates to heat, and runaway means a process that has completely escaped all its control mechanisms. And nearly every EV on the road, alongside millions of smartphones and laptops, utilizes lithium-ion batteries. They're used because of their incredible energy density.
But inside the floorboard of an EV, there aren't just 1 or 2 batteries, right?
Right, there are thousands of individual cells packed tightly together.
Well, they don't just spontaneously combust under normal conditions. There is a whole computer system dedicated to managing them, right?
Yes. The battery management system, or BMS. Think of the BMS as the brain of the battery.
Okay.
As you charge or drive, the cells naturally generate heat. The BMS constantly monitors the temperature of every single cell and pumps liquid coolant through the pack to keep everything within a safe, narrow temperature window.
So under normal stress, it works flawlessly.
Flawlessly.
So what breaks the system?
Severe external trauma that the system simply wasn't designed to handle.
Like a crash.
Yeah, let's say the car suffers a hard impact to the undercarriage that physically deforms the steel and aluminum casing. Or, as is often the case with consumer electronics, someone uses a cheap, unapproved third-party charger.
Oh, right.
That pumps electricity in faster than the BMS is programmed to allow. You are essentially blindfolding the brain.
And that's when a single cell overheats?
Just one. One cell reaches a critical temperature threshold, say 150 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
The internal materials break down, creating an exothermic reaction, which means it generates its own heat.
Okay.
It spikes to 200 degrees, then 300 degrees. And because these cells are packed millimeters apart, that heat instantly transfers to the neighboring cell. Now, 2 cells are in thermal runaway, then 4, then 8.
Wow. It's a microscopic chain reaction.
Moving exponentially faster than the physical coolant can pump. The battery physically cannot shed the heat fast enough.
Yeah.
And the chemical byproduct makes it so much worse.
What happens?
This runaway process releases a highly toxic, highly pressurized cocktail of gases, including hydrogen fluoride. It vents it into the air as a flammable vapor cloud. It essentially paves the path for a massive self-sustaining fire that doesn't even need ambient oxygen to burn.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We just spent the first 10 minutes of this deep dive talking about the existential dread of global nuclear facilities, the threat of 5,000-pound bunker busters, and geopolitical chain reactions.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, we're literally driving our families around on top of thousands of tightly packed, highly sensitive chemical energy cells that can trigger their own unstoppable chain reactions.
It's a wild contrast.
It is. If these things are essentially chemical bombs waiting for a spark, how has the government not regulated them out of existence? Like, why aren't we terrified of our own cars?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the answer is actually quite reassuring.
Oh, thank goodness.
We aren't terrified because, just like our global trade networks and our banking systems, the technology is remarkably resilient when the rules are followed.
When the rules are followed.
Right. Reputable manufacturers encase these batteries in robust shells of reinforced titanium and steel. They program incredibly sophisticated software to manage the charge. The engineering is sound.
So the system is meticulously designed to handle normal, everyday stress.
Exactly.
It's only when the parameters are shattered by a massive physical impact or, bypassing the safety protocols with a cheap charger that the cooling fails and the runaway begins.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The systems are completely safe until the external pressure forces the internal guardrails to fail.
It really is the perfect mechanical explanation for everything we've looked at today. We've taken quite a journey in this deep dive.
We really have.
We started with the geopolitical thermal runaway in the Middle East, with bunker busters and ballistic missiles outpacing the diplomatic cooling systems.
Yeah.
We watched the economic and corporate pressure valves fail, from the sanctions bypass in the Strait of Hormuz to the toxic bond sales at a bank in Dubai. And we traced that exact same physics all the way down to the literal thermal runaway of EV batteries in a driveway.
It can feel incredibly overwhelming, honestly, to look at all these massive systems under such immense strain. But I think it is vital to bring in one last detail from our sources to ground us. Well, in the news and frames section, buried completely beneath the headlines of war, soaring oil prices, and corporate malfeasance, there are two simple photographs.
The images of everyday life.
Yes. One is a photograph of a villager peacefully perusing a book inside a quiet home library. The other is a man walking peacefully by the scenic, still hills of Wheeler Lake. Amidst all the chaos, the collapsing guardrails, and the extreme stress altering the shape of reality, everyday human peace still exists.
That's beautiful.
It is. And really, that's what all of these complex systems, the international diplomacy, the banking regulations, the battery management software, they're ostensibly built to protect that quiet moment by the lake.
That is a much-needed perspective. The overarching system is maybe fracturing under the weight of their own contradictions, but the human element endures.
Exactly.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends. If every complex machine we rely on, from international diplomacy and global trade networks to the EV parked in your garage, is vulnerable to a catastrophic thermal runaway when its cooling systems fail,
Yeah.
what exactly is the battery management system for human society? And as we look at the immense pressure deforming the world today, who or what is keeping our global chain reaction from overheating?